There's a moment in every person's life when the world strips away its gentle mask and shows you its raw, unforgiving face. Perhaps it was the day someone you loved walked away without explanation. Maybe it was the morning you woke up to realize that the dream you'd carried for years had crumbled overnight. Or it could have been that quiet evening when you looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back at you. In that moment, pain becomes your teacher. Not the kind of teacher who speaks in soft, encouraging whispers, but the one who grabs you by the shoulders and forces you to see what you've been avoiding. Pain doesn't lie to protect your feelings. It doesn't sugarcoat reality to make it more palatable. It simply is, in all its brutal honesty. Friedrich Nietzsche understood this truth when he wrote that what does not destroy us makes us stronger. But he went deeper than that popular misquotation suggests. He recognized that pain is not just a destroyer or a strengthener. It's a revealer. Peels back the layers of who we think we are to show us who we actually are beneath the carefully constructed facades. Think about the last time you experienced real pain. Not the kind that makes you wince for a moment, but the kind that settles into your bones and changes the way you walk through the world. In that darkness, what did you discover about yourself? What truths emerged that had been hiding in the comfortable shadows of your everyday life? Pain teaches us that we are more resilient than we ever imagined. When everything familiar crumbles, we don't crumble with it. We bend, we break, we bleed. But we don't disappear. There's something indestructible at our core that pain can wound, but never truly destroy. This discovery is perhaps pain's greatest gift, though we rarely see it as such in the moment. The teacher of pain doesn't arrive with lesson plans or gentle guidance. It bursts through the door of our carefully ordered lives like an unwelcome storm, overturning furniture, shattering windows, leaving chaos in its wake. Yet in that chaos, we find fragments of ourselves we never knew existed. We discover reserves of strength we didn't know we possessed. Consider how pain reveals the difference between what we thought we needed and what we actually need. When loss strips away the excess, we realize that most of what we clung to was just decoration. The relationships that survive, the dreams that endure, the parts of ourselves that remain standing. These are what matter. Pain is a ruthless editor, crossing out everything that isn't essential. But pain doesn't just take, it also gives. It gives us depth where before there was only surface. It gives us compassion where before there was only judgment. It gives us wisdom where before there was only knowledge. The person who has never truly suffered remains, in some fundamental way, a child, unable to fully understand the human experience. There's a quality to the eyes of those who have been taught by pain. They see differently, deeper, with a clarity that can only come from having the comfortable illusions stripped away. They recognize pain in others, not as weakness, but as a shared human condition. They offer not empty platitudes, but the quiet understanding of someone who has walked through their own darkness. Pain teaches us that our stories are not linear narratives of constant progress and achievement. Life is not a mountain we climb steadily toward some predetermined peak. It's more like an ocean, sometimes calm, sometimes turbulent, always in motion. We learn to swim, not by avoiding the waves, but by being tumbled by them until we understand the rhythm of the water. The teacher of pain shows us that our capacity for joy is directly proportional to our capacity for sorrow. The heart that has been broken knows the true value of being whole. The person who has experienced real loneliness treasures authentic connection in a way that those who have never been alone cannot comprehend. Pain calibrates our emotional instruments, making us sensitive to subtleties we previously missed. In our culture, we often speak of pain as something to be avoided, medicated, or quickly overcome. We treat it like a glitch in the system, rather than an integral part of the human experience. But pain is not a bug, it's a feature. It's the price of admission to the full spectrum of what it means to be alive. Nietzsche spoke of the eternal return. The idea that we would live this same life, with all its pain and joy, over and over again for eternity. The question he posed was whether we could say yes to such a fate. Could we embrace not just the beautiful moments, but also the agonizing ones? Could we love our lives enough to want them exactly as they are, including the pain? This is perhaps the ultimate lesson pain has to teach us. That meaning doesn't come from the absence of suffering, but from our response to it. The meaning isn't found in the pain itself, but in what we choose to do with it. Do we let it make us bitter, or do we let it make us wise? Do we use it as an excuse to close our hearts, or do we let it crack us open so more light can get in? Pain teaches us humility. It reminds us that we are not the masters of our universe that we sometimes pretend to be. Forces beyond our control shape our lives in ways we never anticipated. This humbling is not a defeat, it's a liberation. When we stop trying to control everything, we can finally start responding to what's actually happening, rather than fighting against what we wish weren't happening. The classroom of pain has no graduation ceremony. Its lessons continue throughout our lives, each experience building on the last. Each wound teaching us something new about our capacity to heal and grow. The curriculum is never complete because the human heart has infinite depths to explore, infinite capacities for both breaking and mending. In the midst of pain, it's natural to ask why. Why this? Why now? Why me? But pain as a teacher doesn't always provide answers to our why questions. Instead, it offers something more valuable. The opportunity to discover how. How will you respond? How will you grow? How will you use this experience to become more fully yourself? Pain strips away our pretenses and shows us what we're made of at our core. It reveals whether we're the kind of person who blames others or takes responsibility, who becomes bitter or becomes wise, who closes off or opens up. These revelations can be uncomfortable, but they're also invaluable. They give us the raw material for authentic growth and transformation. The teacher of pain doesn't speak in the language of comfort, but in the language of truth. It tells us that life is fragile, that love can be lost, that our plans can be shattered by forces beyond our control. These are not pleasant truths, but they are necessary ones. Without them, we remain naive, unprepared for the full reality of human existence. Consider how pain teaches us about the nature of time. In moments of acute suffering, time seems to stretch endlessly. Minutes feel like hours, and we wonder if the agony will ever end. But pain also teaches us that time is a healer, that what feels permanent in the moment is actually temporary. This too shall pass becomes more than a platitude. It becomes a lived truth. Pain shows us that healing is not a destination, but a process. We don't simply get over our deepest wounds, we learn to carry them with grace. The scar tissue that forms is often stronger than the original skin. We don't return to who we were before. We become someone new, someone marked by experience, but not defined by it. The loneliness of pain is part of its teaching. Even surrounded by loving people, our deepest pain is something we must face alone. This solitude forces us to develop a relationship with ourselves that we might otherwise avoid. We learn to sit with our own difficult emotions, to comfort ourselves, to find resources within that we didn't know we possessed. Pain teaches us about the paradox of vulnerability and strength. To be human is to be vulnerable, and to be vulnerable is to be strong in a way that invulnerability never could be. The person who has never risked being hurt has never truly lived. Pain is often the price we pay for having loved, for having tried, for having dared to hope. There's a quality of attention that pain demands. It pulls us into the present moment with an intensity that few other experiences can match. When we're in pain, we can't escape into fantasies about the future or memories of the past. We're forced to be here now with whatever we're experiencing. This forced presence, uncomfortable as it is, can be profoundly grounding. Pain teaches us to distinguish between what we can control and what we cannot. We cannot control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond. We cannot control whether we'll experience loss, but we can control how we process that loss. This lesson in acceptance and agency is one of pain's most valuable teachings. The teacher of pain shows us that our breaking points are not endpoints but transformation points. The caterpillar must dissolve into liquid before it can become a butterfly. Similarly, we sometimes must be broken down before we can be built up into something new. What feels like destruction is often reconstruction in disguise. Pain reveals the inadequacy of our usual coping mechanisms. The distractions that normally work, the habits that usually comfort us, the stories we tell ourselves about how life works. All of these can fail us when real pain arrives. This failure forces us to dig deeper, to find resources we didn't know we had, to develop new ways of being with difficulty. In the depths of pain, we often discover compassion we didn't know we possessed. Not just for ourselves, though that's important too, but for all beings who suffer. Pain connects us to the universal human experience in a way that joy, wonderful as it is, sometimes cannot. When we've walked through our own valley of shadows, we recognize others who are making that same difficult journey. The teacher of pain doesn't grade on a curve. It doesn't matter if others have suffered more or less than we have. Our pain is real, valid, and worthy of attention regardless of how it measures against someone else's experience. Pain teaches us that suffering is not a competition. It's a shared human condition that deserves compassion, not comparison. Pain shows us that our stories are not finished. What looks like an ending is often a beginning in disguise. The chapter that pain writes in our lives might be dark, but it's not the final chapter. There are pages yet to be written, characters yet to be introduced, plot twists yet to unfold. Pain teaches us to stay curious about what comes next. Sometimes pain teaches through what it takes away, and sometimes through what it gives. It might take away our illusions, but give us clarity. It might take away our certainty, but give us wonder. It might take away our comfort, but give us strength. The exchange is never one we would choose, but it's often one that transforms us in ways we couldn't have imagined. The rhythm of pain is not steady like a metronome, but irregular like a heartbeat. Sometimes racing, sometimes slow, sometimes skipping beats altogether. Learning this rhythm is part of learning to live with difficulty. We discover that we can't rush healing, can't force growth, can't demand that transformation happen on our timeline. Pain teaches us about the complexity of the human heart, how we can feel grateful and resentful simultaneously, how we can love what hurts us, how we can find beauty in the midst of tragedy. These contradictions aren't problems to be solved, but paradoxes to be lived. Pain makes us more comfortable with complexity, more accepting of mystery. In the classroom of pain, repetition is part of the curriculum. We don't learn its lessons once and move on. We circle back to the same themes, the same challenges, the same opportunities for growth. Each time, we have the chance to respond differently, to go deeper, to understand more fully. The spiral nature of this learning can be frustrating, but it's also thorough. Pain teaches us that healing is not about returning to a previous state, but about integrating our experiences into a new wholeness. We don't heal by forgetting what happened to us, but by finding ways to carry it that don't break us. The wound becomes part of our story, but it doesn't become our whole story. The silence that often accompanies deep pain is itself a teacher. In the quiet spaces where words fail, we learn to communicate with ourselves in new ways. We develop a more subtle awareness of our inner landscape, a more nuanced understanding of our emotional terrain. Silence becomes not empty space, but fertile ground. Pain teaches us patience. Not the passive kind that simply endures, but the active kind that works with what is, while remaining open to what might be. We learn to tend our wounds like a gardener tends plants, with consistent care and attention, trusting in processes we cannot see, but must believe in. The teacher of pain shows us that courage is not the absence of fear, but action in the presence of fear. True bravery isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and choosing to love anyway, to hope anyway, to try again anyway. Pain gives us countless opportunities to practice this kind of courage. Sometimes pain teaches through isolation, forcing us to confront ourselves, without the buffer of constant activity or social interaction. In this solitude, we meet parts of ourselves we've been avoiding. We learn to sit with our own company, to find peace in our own presence, to discover that we are not as empty as we feared. When all the external noise falls away, pain reveals the difference between sympathy and empathy, between pity and compassion. It teaches us not just to feel sorry for others, but to feel with them, to recognize their humanity in their suffering, to offer presence rather than solutions. This deeper way of connecting with others is one of pain's most profound gifts. The chemistry of pain is complex. It changes us at a cellular level, rewires our neural pathways, alters our perception of the world. We are literally not the same person after significant pain as we were before it. This transformation is not always comfortable, but it's always meaningful. We become more ourselves, not less. Pain teaches us about the nature of hope, not the naive optimism that believes everything will be fine, but the mature hope that believes we can find meaning and growth even in the midst of difficulty. This kind of hope is not fragile because it's not based on circumstances, but on our capacity to respond to whatever circumstances we face. In the end, pain teaches us that we are both more fragile and more resilient than we ever imagined. We can be broken by experiences we never saw coming, and yet we can also survive and grow from those same experiences. This paradox is at the heart of what it means to be human: vulnerable yet strong, temporary yet eternal, individual yet connected. The teacher of pain never lies because it doesn't need to. Truth is its native language, reality is its curriculum, and transformation is its goal. It doesn't promise that the lessons will be easy, but it guarantees that they will be real. In a world full of false teachers and empty promises, pain stands as an authentic educator. Harsh but honest, difficult but transformative. Perhaps the deepest lesson pain has to teach us is that we are not separate from life, but part of it. Our pain is not a deviation from the human experience, but an integral part of it. When we stop fighting against this reality and start working with it, we discover resources within ourselves that we never knew existed. So the next time pain arrives at your door, remember that it comes not as an enemy, but as a teacher. It may not be the teacher you wanted, but it's often the teacher you need. Listen to what it has to say, not because you enjoy the lesson, but because you trust in your ability to grow from it. Trust that you are stronger than your pain, deeper than your wounds, more resilient than your fears. If this message touched you, if you recognize your own journey in these words, if you're ready to see your pain as a teacher rather than an enemy, comment, "I choose to learn from my pain." Share this recognition with others who might need to hear it. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in our learning makes all the difference in the world.